Hey everyone, welcome back to 996 The Howl. I know we're all focused on Utah. It's all about the Utah Hockey Club, but in order for Utah to make the playoffs, there's competition, especially within their division. If you hope and pray that Utah to make the playoffs, they would have to, finish above a large number of these teams on the board. I did not put them in order of how I think they'll finish in the division. The first time I've done this type of video 4 times over the years now. So this time I just went alphabetical because I'm always wrong. I mean, I'm always like, it's obvious to get the first top teams right, the first two, the Avalanche and Dallas. I've been praying for like 3 years that Winnipeg's wheels are going to fall off. Somehow every year they have a strong start to the season, almost like 50 to 60 games, and then everything falls apart in the last 20 to 25 and the first round of the playoffs. Maybe this year is a year where it's a whole season of them struggling. So let's get into it. We'll start with Chicago. I think besides Chicago, Nashville, obviously, who had the big additions, Chicago really did a large number of additions and some quality NHLers as well. You got Teuvo Teravainen returning back to Chicago. He started his career with the Blackhawks before moving to Carolina. Tyler Bertuzzi, Bossois, Mikheyev, and TJ Brody, along with Maroon Martinez and Craig Smith, are the additions. The additions are in green. The subtractions are in red. They lose Zaitsev, Blackwell, and Tyler Johnson, who's still an unrestricted free agent. His career took a nosedive since moving on from Tampa Bay. I know there's some injuries with him, but unfortunate fall from grace from his Tampa Bay days. For Chicago, their goalie tandem is Mrazek and Bossois. Mrazek tends to get injured, and they got a young goaltender in Soderblom, who played a number of games last season, thrown into the fire basically in Chicago's coming out of that first years of rebuild with their first season with Bedard. And some young players to keep note of for Chicago: Nazar, Oliver Moore, and they just recently drafted Levshunov. We might see him make his NHL debut this year. So Chicago did some upgrades. They're going to be much better than last year, sort of surrounding Bedard, Hall. Who else do they have? Kurashev, Seth Jones. There's something there. Their goaltending is still pretty bad, even though I like Bossois. Just that starting role isn't really defined. But they'll be better than last year. I could see them finishing 7th in the division, maybe not last place. Then we go to the Avalanche. We got additions in Brandstrom, Shillington, Phillips, and DeHaan. Not much additions for the Avalanche. They're kind of cap strapped. They still got to figure out what's going on with Landeskog. Nichushkin's dealing with some issues as well. So they kind of didn't add much. They lose Parise to retirement. Prosvetov was an Arizona Coyote prospect goalie. A lot of people, including me, were kind of upset we lost him to waivers to the Avalanche last season. He had a miserable time with Colorado, and now he's moved on to Russia and the KHL. So, not really a mistake by Bill Armstrong there, losing Prosvetov to waivers. They lose Trennan, Cogliano, and Jack Johnson. So the Avalanche pretty much stay relatively the same. You got McKinnon, Makar, Rantanen, Manson, Gerard, Taves. Like I said, Landeskog, Nichushkin. We'll see what happens with them. They still have Lehkonen. They're a pretty good team. Their goalies are Georgiev and a new up-and-comer in Noonan. So, a rookie backup with Georgiev. A bit shaky goaltending tandem there, but unbelievable defense and some firepower. You can never count out the Avalanche. I think they'll pretty much finish the top two in the division. Other youngsters: Calum Ritchie might get his NHL debut, and Kovalenko has moved from the KHL and should be playing with the Avalanche as well. Then we go to Dallas. They added, a lot of Dallas fans scratching their head at some of the moves here, adding Matt Dumba and Lyubushkin to pretty beefy contracts. They get the Smith, Blackwell, and Brandon Smith. They lose Chris Tanev, Faxa, Ryan Sutter, Pavelski, Dellandrea, Hawkenpaw, Craig Smith, and Wedgwood. They lose a lot. They're kind of going to stick with that core of Robertson, Hintz, and Wyatt Johnston, along with Sagan, Ben, and Heiskanen. They got that veteran sort of young core mixed in well there. They got to break through at some point. I thought for sure last season they would have made it to the finals. They deserved to beat out Edmonton, I believe, in the playoffs a few months ago. Their goalie tandem, Ottinger and DeSmith. Ottinger had a back step last season, not too elite, so I expect him to have a much better season this upcoming season. Then we go to Minnesota. Maybe Bill Guerin, the GM of Minnesota, forgot it was the offseason, or he just left the country for 3 months. They didn't do much in free agency or in trades. They get Trennan, Lacow, and if I have to put Travis Boyd as one of your additions, you didn't do a really good job. And then you got Goligoski, Shaw, and Patan. They didn't lose much. They didn't gain much. Pretty much staying the same, middle of the road, spinning their wheels. They don't know what direction to go. I know they got a lot of dead cap in, coincidentally, Parise and Sutter. So I guess they're just waiting for those cap hits to move away, get off the books, and then do some more stuff. The goalie tandems are Fleury and Gustafsson, and they got a new young goaltender in Wallstedt, who should play some games for the Wild. I think Fleury's way over the hill. It's his last year, he said, in the National Hockey League. So I expect Wallstedt to start some games. You got some young players, Boldy, Faber, Rossi to go with Kaprizov, Eriksson Ek, Zuccarello still there. They got Spurgeon and some other veteran D-men there. It's a good team, just honestly, like for me, their ceiling is a first round exit. They got to make some moves now that Kaprizov's in his prime. If Kaprizov never was the star and elite player he was when he came over from Russia at the age of 26, 27, he was a later round pick, not a first round pick, this team would have been deep into a rebuild. So they got lucky with Kaprizov, and like I said, they got some youngsters in Rossi, Faber, and Boldy. Then we go to Nashville, who made some noise. Man, they literally just bought their playoff window. For me, they're like Minnesota. They were like Minnesota, St. Louis, where they don't really have a direction, not really sure where to go. Do they commit to a young rebuild? No, they just went out and spent money and pretty much opened a two to 3 year window, I would say, to compete for the cup. They got Steven Stamkos, Brady Shea, Mark Giroux, and Wedgwood. They lose Beauvillier, Anderson Dolan, McDonough, Glass, Zucker, Lankinen, and Tyson Barrie. Nashville, with their goaltending situation the past couple of years, pretty much a head scratcher to me. They had Saros, Ingram, and Askarov, and then they put Ingram on waivers, and the Coyotes pick him up. And then they sign Lankinen in free agency to replace Ingram, but then they move on from Lankinen 2 years later, and now they sign Wedgwood. So now you have Saros, Wedgwood, and Askarov. Askarov, who's one of the better goalie prospects, and then there's rumors coming out that Nashville's not happy with Askarov, so they might lose him in a trade and go with Saros and Wedgwood. Just, you have good goalies, hold on to them, increase their value, and then trade them. They should have, I know as a Coyotes and Utah fan, I liked that they put Ingram on waivers, but they should have kept Ingram, not really sign Lankinen, and then if they did sign Lankinen and had Ingram, carry your team with 3 goalies, throw Ingram in net. Teams will see, he had a great 20 games, and then you trade him then at high value as opposed to losing him for free on waivers. But Nashville, they have no young players. They have 2 notable players under the age of 25, which is Evangelista and Tomasino. And again, those names aren't elite young players. They're second line, third line wingers or centermen, whatever they are. But you got Yossi, Forsberg, O'Reilly. So this is pretty much a veteran team here with those players I mentioned, along with Marcus Stamkos, and Shea. So, they're trying to go for it all in the next 2 years, it seems like, before it all crashes down in some flames. Then we go to St. Louis, who is in the news a lot with their offer sheets for Broberg and Holloway. They get Ryan Sutter, Faxa from Dallas. They got Texier, who I like, a 4th, 3rd line, gritty, hardworking player. And then the 2 brothers, P.O. Joseph, Pierre-Olivier Joseph, and Matthew Joseph. Pierre-Olivier Joseph was a first-round pick for the Coyotes. They traded him for Phil Kessel. Pittsburgh, I don't know, couldn't develop him well or had nowhere to put him or just didn't like how he developed, and now St. Louis picks him up. So in hindsight, I like the trade. I would rather have those 3 years of Phil Kessel than spend so much time developing Joseph. And if he can't even crack an old Pittsburgh lineup decor, then he's not living up to that first round pick pedigree as it is. So he wouldn't have done much for the Coyotes or Utah if he stayed in the system. They're going to Winnipeg. This could be the year where they lose it all and finish last in the division or between 6th and 8th place in the division. They lose a lot. Well, St. Louis lost Blaze, Hayes, Verana, Bertuzzo, and Scandella. Didn't really lose much. I shouldn't move on to St. Louis just yet because they're young players. Jake Neighbors should start in the NHL, and Perunovic, a young defenseman, should be good as well. To go with a forward core of like a mixed, it's like Dallas sort of, just worse. They got the youngsters in Kyrou and Thomas, and then veterans in Shen and Buchnevich, and then their D side is like really old. You got Falk, Letty, and Krug, but then they went young with getting Broberg and Joseph here. So they're kind of not sure where to go and trying to hope it works out like it's been working out with Dallas. And then back to Winnipeg. They lose to Foley, Monahan, Schmidt, Dillon, and Brissois. Those are good NHL quality players, and they don't really replace them with anything. They got Kakkonen, who I think is not a really good backup to Hellebuck, and Shaw, Anderson Dolan, and Comrie as sort of a goalie insurance in case Kakkonen doesn't live up to NHL standards. They still got those great forward players in Scheifele, Connor, and Ehlers to go along with some youngsters in Perfetti. They got Heinola on the back end on defense, and Velarde and Iafallo. I like those players from the Dubois trade. They have those players up front. So they got some talent still, but they're getting older. They're not getting much help in free agency or trades. Their GM doesn't like to make a lot of moves. So we could start to see them sort of lose the momentum and getting like 90 to 100 points every season. I could start to see them missing the playoffs consistently moving forward. So that's it for me. What about Utah? We'll have my expectations where I think Utah will finish. I think Utah has a good chance to be ahead of Chicago, Minnesota, St. Louis, Winnipeg. We'll see with Nashville what happens. But as a Utah fan, these are important games. Whenever you see these games on the schedule, you need to win these games. The Coyotes last season, they struggled against Winnipeg and Dallas a lot. They had good fortune against St. Louis, Nashville, Minnesota, Chicago, and Colorado. But Dallas and Winnipeg, they would lose a lot of those games, and they were severely outmatched. So hopefully, under the Utah name, they have better results against Winnipeg and Dallas and maintain some good hockey play against the other teams. That's it for me. Thank you for watching. If you like what you see, spread the word. And as always, thank you for your support.